So welcome everyone. This is one of our normal NCAF forums, but we got with us tonight as well Locomotion, because they're very interested in how you address poverty and the impacts on that. We may have some people from MP Watch National on here as well, because they sometimes join us. So that's great. And we've got a fairly full agenda tonight, which is, got timings to it, and I would try to keep to those timings as much as I can. We've got Professor Olga Biosca, who's going to talk about microcredit, questions to her after that. Then Karen Davies from Purple Shoots, and then Nnenna Anyanwu from Enfield CAB, who'll be coming on later because she has a previous meeting, then questions to them. And then we could talk a little bit about a project we're working on about working with schools on climate change. So that is a fairly full agenda, which I hope we'll get through without too much trouble. Let me just warn again, like I did at last meeting, my internet it's not as good as it was in my old home. We've moved and sometimes it does drop out. And if I drop out, I'll only be out for about 30 or 40 seconds and it should come back. But I hope that won't happen. It hasn't happened too much, but I'm just giving you that warning. Okay, so we're going to talk about climate justice and poverty in a way, and how we address that today. And one of the ways that has been quite successful is through the revolution of microcredit. And microcredit began some decades ago in Bangladesh with Muhammad Yunus, who looked at poorer communities and poorer people and found that they had a real problem in getting financed. The finance they got was often through money lenders and loan sharks, and as a result, they were in really dire straits. So he was looking at a way in which they could, get finance to help them, and he set up a bank, which was a small thing and is big now, Grameen Bank, and gave small loans, very small loans to people to help them out of poverty. And there was a really high repayment rate, something like 95% of those people involved, paid back. Now, it began in underdeveloped countries, but now the movement has gone worldwide. I mean, there are millions of people now who have been helped by microcredit, and it's happening in developed countries as well, in the United States and in the UK as well. Microcredit is also becoming something that is beginning to happen. And there is in Caledonian University a whole department, a unit called the Yunus unit, and the Yunus department. Olga will tell me for sure what you're called. And they really specialize on microcredit. They research on it. They look at how it can be applied and so on. And they deal with financial inclusion and how you include people who are poor into receiving the income that they need to make their life surviving. Anyhow, Olga's going to be here to talk to us first of all. She's from the Yunus department. She's from Caledonian University. And I'm really pleased, Olga, that you could be with us. I'm going to really start by asking her some questions, and then we'll open it up to everyone else in the meeting to ask your questions as well. Let me just let a couple people in as I'm doing it. Okay, so let's start with you, Olga. Thank you for joining us and for taking part in the meeting today. So if we could start by, if you could tell us, first of all, I mentioned what microcredit is, but some people would want a fuller explanation. Could you tell us what you think or what you know microcredit is?
Thank you, Francis, and thank you everyone for being here this evening, listening to us talk about microcredit. So I think you explained it very well. So Muhammad Yunus, in the 70s, more or less, started making small loans to people. He was a professor in an American university, but he was Bangladeshi in origin. And he went back to Bangladesh and thought about ways in which he could help people The origins of microcredit as such are very tied onto entrepreneurship. So his form of microlending was usually related to set up a business, self-employment. We're not talking about small business, we're talking about micro business or somebody doing an economic activity. So that's how it started. Then Muhammad Yunus went and won the Nobel Peace Prize for precisely this Grameen Bank, which has millions of borrowers now and belongs to the woman. Most of the people he lent to, the financially excluded in Bangladesh at that time, and also the people who had more trouble in accessing like money for entrepreneurship were the women. So practically 100% of the borrowers that he lent the money to were women. In the concept of microcredit, like it's a small loan to people who cannot access loans from Ministry of Finance at fair interest rates. It doesn't mean it's a low interest rates because actually small loans are very expensive to provide operationally, but it does mean that it's a much better alternative than the ones that are around, i.e. loan sharks. In this case, the loans are short term and they're paid very frequently, very tiny, small amounts. And that's how this type of loan was different. And it helped people repay better with the cash that they were generating from the self-employment or the activity, the economic activity that they chosen. Another big thing that he started doing was he lent to groups. So groups of women that supported each other. And at the beginning, there was this solidarity in which if somebody didn't repay, the other had to repay for them. That has now disappeared of every microcredit program in the world. And what they do now is like they generate support groups, sometimes of people who have similar economic activities, sometimes of people who have different economic activities, and they create this network of entrepreneurs and support each other in times of crisis. So I think there was another important component, which was savings. There was sometimes savings associated to the repayment of the loans, or sometimes because obviously these people are financially excluded, not only in terms of loans, but also in terms of savings. So to generate some savings mechanisms, the microlenders would do that too. So it was it was a holistic development tool. It was understood as such at the time. It has evolved a lot from then, and not only in developing countries, but also in more advanced high-income economies like in the UK. And it serves, I think, different purposes. It's really interesting how it's adapted to the UK.
So it's basically about including people who normally can't get money and tackling poverty that way. Is that the basis of it?
Yes, absolutely. So the way in which it started, it was to tackle poverty and to give opportunities to people. So the loan in itself was only a means to an end. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about financial inclusion. There was a very similar program that started also in the 70s, but in Brazil. It was trialed by a big organization called Acción International, which still exists. And it was to support entrepreneurs who had just been through conflict. So it was a way of regenerating the community, creating trust amongst people in the community, and not only a community network, but also economic activities that would give opportunities.
So we know that it started in Bangladesh. You talked about Brazil. We know it's happened in India and many other countries. People will say, well, that is in the underdeveloped world. That's where poverty really is very, very strong. Is it applicable to a country like the UK or the United States, for example?
Absolutely. So there was there is a branch of Grameen, the Grameen Bank that Yunus started. There is a branch of Grameen Bank in the US. They are very, very big and they serve different purposes. So microcredit is not only about the credit, it's also other financial services. And I think this applies more to the high income countries. So for example, you have insurance, you have micro savings, you have other type of financial services that people who are financially vulnerable or do not have collateral or do not have guarantees, they cannot provide, or even do not have stable income. And because in the UK and the US, you have these very harsh, I'm going to say, credit scoring systems in which you need to build a credit score. So you need to loan and then pay your debt. But if there are things that you don't have, for example, a utility bill, then you're not able to borrow from the mainstream banks and you need to go to other type of providers. Or if you don't have a stable income coming from employment, for example, it becomes really, really hard. So I think the UK and the US are particularly good countries to have or have proved to be particularly good countries to have microfinance, because there is a high part of the population that is financially excluded and that cannot access mainstream banks.
No, I mean I mean poverty is in a way growing in some parts of the UK, and so it will be very applicable there. I mean, one example, like I gather, is in Lewisham, who worked with their credit union to help people who were tenants with private landlords who faced eviction, and by giving them loans, they were able to save 400 families from being evicted, and the repayment rate on that loans or on those loans was 87%, which was quite amazing. Is that something that you've been looking at in Caledonian at Caledonian University? I mean, how it can help people in those situations like the homeless?
So we know that there are I mean, this is a situation in which we are learning. So the North is learning from the South. So it's an unusual situation where we are learning from low and middle income countries. They do have something called housing loans that are, housing microcredit that is fairly developed. And what they do with those loans is they improve the quality of the housing, because housing is pretty appalling. So they are small loans. They wouldn't be able to buy a house, but what they're able to do is, yes, pay rent if they need to pay rent, or get some appliance that they need, or, clean the house so that there's no mold on it, and small improvements. So I think that is now being piloted in the UK. So this type of, I mean, Lewisham's pilot scheme that has proved to be very successful is quite new. So it's something that is being piloted now. Pretty much as we speak. So we haven't started yet doing any research, but we've seen other countries and other in other contexts it has been helpful. Also, don't forget that we all need financial services. I mean, if you don't get a loan from a community development finance institution, which are the microcredit lenders in the UK, you will get a loan from friends and family. But we all need, our income goes up and down, or we all have sudden shocks in expenditure and we need to cover that. And, it's not only applicable to low income families, it will also be applicable to high income families. The thing is, like, we have access to other type of financial services.
One of the things I learned by seeing what Yunus was doing, that when he gave loans to people who were going to start up a business, or they had a particular social need, he also built a community around those people. As you said, many of them were women. And, they then got together to help each other. So it wasn't just a loan to an individual, it actually created a community, didn't it?
Yeah, so that was what it was about. And I think that is the function that it can have in the UK too. It certainly has been the function that it has in Grameen Bank in the US. They have started offering a lot of non-financial services. They have some clients who are immigrants, for example. They cannot access the complicated health system in the US. They have started to work with different agents, different services, to create a community of women that are powerful in the end, right? To empower these people to do things.
And the other thing I noticed in looking at the work of Yunus is that he pays a lot of attention to sustainability. He wants the project to sustain, he wants it to work with the environment, with nature. How important can the microcredit movement help in a time when we have to adapt to climate change?
Well, it's crucial. So Muhammad Yunus has a book, as you will probably know. It's called The Three Zeros. So where he proposes a world of zero poverty, zero unemployment, and zero net carbon emissions. In his conception of social business, he thinks sustainability is crucial. So even at a very small scale, he would promote e-mobility schemes, for example, where If somebody's going to start a business, you know, they would lower the consumption of fuels and carbon fuels, of, you know, one-off plastics, for example, things like that. So there's always tiny little things that can be done. I mean, there are very, very exciting projects in Latin America and in Africa in particular, in which microfinance is used for adaptation and mitigation. More mitigation than adaptation is being used for adaptation for climate resilient to smallholder farmers, for example. And there's very exciting projects going on.
I guess it would be quite applicable in this country where you're in an impoverished area, there are not trees around, people are suffering from heat excess. People getting together to help each other and having loans to do that would be very important.
Yes, I think in particular, so if you're giving productive loans, bearing in mind, you know, the sustainability of the business and how it can affect climate change, and the, you know, that the community is clean and sustainable ultimately.
Okay, how difficult is it, do you think, when people have got the loans to follow through? Do they get help and backup from the people who provide the loans, like the Grameen Bank or wherever, or are they left on their own?
No, absolutely, it's crucial. So there is so yes, absolutely, they get help. One of the biggest things that community development finance institutions in the UK, but also most microcredit providers do, is they provide a lot of flexibility with payments. So they recognize that the people that they are serving are people that are very, you know, shocks happen to all of us, but these people have very little slack. And so there are payment holidays that are sometimes embedded into the microcredit contracts, and you can choose to pay or not pay. And if you use up all your holidays, you can always connect. It's very much people focused. So there'll be a credit officer that in the end becomes your friend, because you talk to them so often, and you can ask as much advice as you want. And then there is also the fact that they do not only provide financial services, a lot of CDFIs and also microcredit institutions around the world provide non-financial services, which could be, you know, skills development of many things, business development services of many kinds, mentorship for your business, legal rights advice, and many others. I mean, there's plenty of non-financial services depending on the type of client that the microfinance institution serves.
Okay, well, let's leave my questions there and let's open it up and see if other people have questions as well, because I mean it's a very interesting concept, which, although not totally new here, is a lot newer than it is in Bangladesh and the countries who developed it. Has anyone got any questions they'd like to ask Olga about this? Bill, don't forget to put your microphone on.
Yeah. It's not so much a question. I've actually been to Grameen in Bangladesh and met Yunus, and I thought possibly other people might be interested in some of the things he said. This was way back in 1992, so I'm slightly out of date and what he's said since. But one of the things he said was that whatever a normal bank did, he did absolutely the opposite. So they usually demanded a collateral, and he didn't. They gave large loans, and he gave small loans, and they gave almost exclusively to men, and he gave almost exclusively to women. And another slight insight that when he first started this, he was a professor at Chittagong University, worrying about why were the people in the next village so poor. So he went to find out and started asking the women of the village, usually via him sitting outside the hut and them inside the hut, because of course they're all Muslims. And he found 41 women who were busy making stools, very nice stools, which they could sell, but they were basically in hock to the moneylender, and he set the rate of return on their loans and he also ensured that he got to buy back the stools, which you could then sell on. You know. So what they needed was finance, as you already said, Olga. And he found, after talking to 41 of these women, that the total finance they needed to get out of the hands of the moneylenders and be able to make and buy the goods for to make the stool with, and then sell it on to somebody who wasn't the moneylender. The total for all those 41 women was the equivalent between them of $27.
Right.
So we are really talking very, very small amounts of money there.
Yeah, it is very small. That's why the microloans here at about that level. Yasmin, you've got a point to make or a question?
Thank you very much for that really interesting talk. And as someone of Bangladeshi origin, I follow Muhammad Yunus very carefully with everything that's going on there.
Yeah.
Now, one of the questions that comes to my mind is concerning people on lower incomes. What happens to their benefits, say, if they were to embark on such a liaison, shall we say, with the microcredit firm? Because I hear around me, in fact, I was with two people today, lots of people who'd like to set up a business like this, but are very concerned about the insecurity of finance when they get into this, you see. And the potential for this is wonderful. And in places like Bangladesh and America, even, where the benefit system is not quite so robust as here, people might want to take that chance. But what happens in a place like the UK?
Okay, Olga?
Thank you, Yasmin. So that's an excellent question, which I am not going to reply to because you're absolutely right. It's a challenge with the benefits. But I'm going to let Karen Davies from Purple Shoots, which is one of the community development finance institutions, reply to that one because she's had challenges, and I just want you to hear from her.
Okay, Karen,
I was grinning then because that is such a big issue. So, because you'll hear about me in a minute, but we basically, all the people we lend to are marginalised and usually on benefits. And so there is an issue, and we are constantly lobbying Parliament to try to get it changed, because what happens is if somebody borrows money from us to start a little business and they're on benefits, they have to report monthly, like little monthly management accounts, and the stupid benefit system takes the balance of the income and the expenditure from the business as their income and use that to deduct from the benefits, which is monstrous, because that isn't their income, that's the business's income, and they need that balance for the next month to maintain the business. So it creates a big problem for them, and I mean most of them soldier through it, but it needs addressing, and it's such a simple solution. I mean, they just need to take the business owner's drawings as their income and not the business's profit, because they might make a profit one month and then next month they will make a loss, and they'll need there's no profit to cover it. So it just jeopardized businesses. And then after 12 months, they hit what they have to. There's an assumption by the DWP that they're earning the minimum wage, and then the benefits are cut, assuming that they're earning the minimum wage. And obviously most businesses are not generating that much for their owners at that point. But nevertheless, loads and loads of people do this. They don't want to be on benefits, and so they try, and we support them as much as we can.
Okay. We're going to hear more from Karen in a minute, but Lorna, you've got your hand up.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Francis. Yeah, Olga, I was listening intensely to what you had to say. And what I recognized is something from 1964. I wasn't born in 1964, but certainly from my previous research. Credit union in the UK was brought into the UK. Yeah, there was some existence in Northern Ireland, but brought to the UK by the Caribbean community. So I recognize, so you've probably heard this already, I know about this, the difficulty trying to get finance from bank institutions was so difficult that they formed a credit union. And so many credit unions do still exist up and down the UK. Similar to, this microcredit, like just to help people just to get by. It could be just to get shopping or even to get onto the housing ladder. So it varied. So it's definitely a model to revisit again, to deal with why we're having this seminar today, to discuss this. How can we move forward to help those in the community who need finance? Not a great deal, but something just to help them. And as Karen was just saying about the difficulties with some, I mean, I know a lot of people have that same difficulty. They want to advance themselves, but they're so measured. Everything is so, we were talking about microcredit, but then it's like a kind of like a micromanagement of people's management. You can't actually get forward because, if you're on benefits, it's like, well, hold on, you've got this. It's like it's people want to be able to be in that winning seat, and it's like they're trying to and they can't. So it's like it'd be good to see how we can move forward as a community to support those within our community to get out of poverty. So it's just a statement I just wanted to make. That's all. So
That's interesting, Olga. I mean, how do we sort of develop the infrastructure where people can do that? I mean, we can talk about microcredit and Yunus has got the Grameen Bank and he's got quite a big infrastructure. We don't have that in the UK. We have credit unions, but they're not always as strong as we would like them to be. I mean, do you have any view on how we can take this forward in the way Lorna has just said?
Yeah, thank you, Lorna. I think that was an excellent comment. So, listen, I was kind of nodding with the Caribbean because it's not only the credit unions that you brought. We do a lot of research with people who are financially excluded. And one of the other things that you've brought about is the rotating credits and savings associations, which is that everyone puts money in a pot and the pot rotates. And that is informal, right? That is purely based on trust, but you cannot imagine how many people with funding that are using that just because the benefit, even formally, so they even put the money into a bank account, but it's just like the benefit system is complicated. They will take away the benefits from you if they find that you have any extra income that they don't know where it comes from. Credit unions, not the credit unions that used to be or were created to be, I don't know. They are based on membership, and financially vulnerable people, let's face it, they are not members. They are not included. They have to build up savings before they can take up a loan. The amount of savings they need to build is too high. They have other needs that come up before they can actually build the level of savings. So they do not serve purpose anymore for the financially excluded. So I think the reply would be, again, community development finance institutions, but they are slowly disappearing because it's so expensive to give loans to people who are on the verge of financial exclusion. And they don't get the support from government, unfortunately, that credit unions are getting.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to ask a question at all? I mean, Paul, do you want to say anything? Because you've been talking about homelessness and the way that might relate to the sort of things we're doing. Have you anything you can add to that?
Well, yes. Well, we've been talking with the North London Credit Union, particularly about this, and I was interested what you were saying there, Olga, about the restrictions that people have, because in our conversations with the North London Credit Union, that they do take on people with no credit, but what they do at the same time, this is what they've said to us, we need to investigate this, but they said that they do take people on, but what they then encourage people to do is save alongside the repayment of the loan, and that's where we were really interested in talking to them, because a lot of the conversations that we're having with our community
Okay, Olga?
Yeah, so I think, thank you, Paul, really interesting. So I don't know about this scheme in particular. Usually when credit unions do that, they do it as a partnership. I don't know if they're partnering with somebody, perhaps a housing association or some private, I don't know. But usually they do it as a pilot and a partnership. I don't know how advanced they are, but they can definitely do it. I mean, it's in the remit to do it. So I'm pleased to hear that they are finding solutions to kind of including these people into the financial system. So, very pleased to hear that it could work. It's just, I feel that some credit unions cannot make that effort, or it's not even that they don't want to, it's just that they cannot, because it's just so expensive that they would lower the funds too much and they won't be financially sustainable for the members. So I feel that these type of projects, like the one you're mentioning of the North London credit unions, they're great. And usually they are supported by other partners. And I think that's the way forward. Because let's face it, financial exclusion is a dimension of social exclusion, right? So there are other things that are happening. People are financially excluded, but not only. There is something else going on all the time. It might be homelessness, it might be, unstable jobs, it might be unemployment, it might be many other things. So I think that partnerships are the way forward, and in the way that you are actually discussing this as a local partnership within a borough, it's a very nice way of implementing a project of this kind, because you have all the community partners involved, and that usually works very well.
I mean, I gather the Lewisham one was done in a partnership with the University of Sheffield, wasn't it? But I don't know whether they were a financial partner, but they certainly helped them do that. Okay, well, let's move on to Karen, and I'm sure when we ask questions to Karen, Olga will come back in as well. Karen is the founder of a group called Purple Shoots, and that is sort of exclusively an organisation that works in the microcredit field, and they're in Wales. But Karen has written a lot, and she tells me before we came on today, they've had a really good article in the press and an interview on the BBC, I think today, which I'm going to try and get and send around. But, welcome, Karen, to us as well. But you've already said something already, so people have heard you. Olga made you jump the gun, and quite right too. But first of all, just tell us what Purple Shoots is.
Right, thank you. Thank you all for inviting me. So I feel very honoured to be here. Purple Shoots is the charity fundamentally that I set up to tackle poverty, unemployment, financial exclusion, social isolation through enterprise. So one of the key things we do is microcredit, but only to the most marginalised in our society, only to people that nobody else will help, and it's to enable them to start a business. So it's not for them to buy an emergency washing machine or anything like that. There are providers that do that, but ours is just to enable people to start a business. So it's very transformational for the people that we help, because they're starting with nothing and no hopes, trapped in this benefits system that we've been talking about. And if they can get a loan and get a business off the ground, that's a route out, and it starts to address the poverty that they're in. And they are local businesses, so they produce wealth that stays in the local community. And I mean, I would argue that they're greener than bigger businesses because they use local employees, local suppliers, and so on. But that's another issue. But so that's one of the big things that we do. So we are a CDFI, a Community Development Finance Institute, but we're a slight misfit amongst them, because we deal with such a different client base. Then the other thing that we do is related. So we do a lot of support for the people that we help, but we obviously we copied the microfinance idea from Grameen, and we copied the groups that they established in. I went on a trip to India and looked at the self-help groups in India, and I also visited some groups in Uganda. So we call them self-reliant groups here because self-help groups has got different connotation. But these are groups of people that come together initially as support groups with an enterprising sort of element. So we encourage the groups to save together and to try out enterprising ideas of some sort. Lots of our groups are more interested in things in their community and changing things in their community than in enterprise. But they do all different things, and it's hard to explain because they're all led by the people who are in them. So I can't say we follow this program and they do this. So it's different.
But that's interesting that they want to do things in their community. It's not just about developing a business, is it? And if they want to do things in their community, what sort of self-reliant groups can be set up? What have you seen and what have you done yourself in developing self-reliant groups that is also about community building?
Okay, so a number of them start. So I have to say, a lot of the members in the groups, I imagined that they would be sort of people who are going to definitely go along and start a business, but a lot of them are either have caring responsibilities. They're usually women. A lot of them have health issues or they have disabilities, which severely limits their ability to work. So working together makes a big difference. But what is surprising is when they come together and with a lot of their own issues, a lot of the chaos that's full of their lives, but they look outwards. And so we've had one group, for example, where they save money together, they make a bit of money from they do some crafty stuff and make some money that way. But they noticed in their community that there were lots of young people who couldn't cook and just didn't have normal life skills. So once a month, they run a sort of a life skills club for the young people in their community and teach them cooking and sewing and things like that. So that's one group. There's another group that runs little community events where they are, film nights and things like that, because it was a poor community that didn't have anybody running that sort of thing. So they organise tea dances and all sorts of things for their community. There are others that have done sort of cleanups in their community or created a community garden or what else? There's quite a mix, and yet we do have people who do go on and start businesses and move into self-employment. So it's a big range. But in the third world models is a lot more about lending money to each other. The way our groups seem to have worked is a lot more about saving money together, building up a pot, and then doing something with that pot of money that's positive, either to help each other, but often it's not, it's to do something. So there's another group actually of women with disabilities who've started another group, a different group, where they're teaching other people their skills. So it's the act of coming together has some quite surprising and, well, I suppose I was surprised, unexpected results.
When you're developing a community group, like people who want to learn cooking or so on, how does the microcredit system work with that? I mean, can they pay back loans? Are they loans? Are they grants? What do you do in those circumstances?
So they often they don't need, because they don't usually start anything ambitious until they've saved up enough money, so they don't need to borrow. So in all honesty, the number of loans we've lent to group members is really small. They tend not to need to borrow. Where they have borrowed, we've done it on very favourable terms. It's usually been, so we had one group that was doing well, they started off doing sort of visiting elderly people in their community just as company, and then they ended up being asked to do stuff for them, sort of a bit of shopping, hoovering. So they wanted to buy a good quality hoover, so we lent them the money for that, and then they paid it back. But often they seem to have accumulated enough money from their savings and little income generating activities that means they don't need to borrow.
Okay, so I mean, if you develop self-reliant groups, we mentioned earlier with Olga that in a time of climate change adaptation, self-reliant groups will be important. Have you ever given any thought to that and how microcredit might help there?
So we're working, it's a bit early days at the minute, but we're working on a project in Sheffield where they want to combine a lot of green issues with financial inclusion, sort of a holistic fund, I suppose, that will support larger green projects as well as very small community-based projects. And the aim is that some of those community projects will be led by self-reliant groups, small community groups that care about that sort of thing. So I definitely think it's possible, and if this project works, it's replicable, so it would be good. And there's quite a lot of people taking an interest in it because of the range of organisations that might be involved in it. So we could get funders in to fund bigger green energy type projects or home conversion projects or something, but also much smaller projects.
That might be applicable, for example, for a street who wanted to develop a community energy system amongst themselves.
Yes, that is exactly what they're trying to do, and what we hope we might achieve in Sheffield. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, the other thing, and I know Local Motion is very interested in this, is housing, and we've already talked about it. But have you done any work in housing, and particularly with the homeless?
So homeless people on the whole are not ready to start a business. So that it's better if they have some sort of accommodation first, but we have worked with quite a number of ex-offenders, and they are often released either completely homeless, they're not supposed to be, but they are, or they are in temporary hostels, or they're with family that don't really want them. And in those cases, where we've lent them money to start a business, it's enabled them to build up enough reserves to pay the deposit to rent a property. We've had I think 3 who've managed to do that. They started we lent the money, they started the business from where they were staying and built up enough to get themselves into their own rented place, which has worked well.
Let me ask you one more question before we open it up. And I was going to ask this to Olga, but she said it was much more appropriate to ask it to you. If someone wanted to start a microcredit unit, like Purple Shoots, for example, how would they go about it? How would we go about it, for example, in Enfield? What would you do? What would you have to set up to do it?
So you've got to have a plan, and the big barrier for small microcredit organisations setting up is that you have to have FCA authorisation, and that is a real pain to get. There is a very small version of us in Leeds that I think they've managed to do 3 loans so far. It's really tiny. It took her 18 months to get FCA authorisation and a lot of legal fees. So that is a huge barrier to microcredit organisations setting up. So when I started Purple Shoots, my idea was that we would run it in Wales, and then we would replicate it. So we'd encourage somebody else to do it in different parts of the UK. But what's happened is nobody wants to do that because it's too difficult. So they do it. So we've got basically satellite offices. So in the West Country in Yorkshire, where people are employed by us and do it under the Purple Shoots banner. So that's an issue. And raising the money is the other issue, because we are battling against the stigma of the people that we're serving. So the people that a lot of finance people won't fund the people we serve because they think they're scroungers or lazy or useless. And so why would they fund an organisation that wants to support them? And that is a big problem for us raising money. So, and there is nothing, the government does nothing to support this end of the market. They talk a lot about supporting small businesses, and so do all the government bodies like the British Business Bank and Federal Finance, but they don't help the really difficult stuff at the bottom end. So raising money is a huge issue as well. I don't want to put anyone off though, because I'd be very happy to help anybody who wanted to try to set one up. And I can share policies and applications and everything. So I don't want to put anyone off, but it's a struggle.
I was going to ask you if you would help, and that's great that you said you could. And obviously, that's something we could take up with our MPs as well, because obviously there needs to be changed in the law to make it work more effectively. Okay, well, thank you for that. We're going to go to Nnenna now, and then bring questions into both you and Nnenna. Now, Nnenna is with us. She is the CEO of the Citizens Advice Bureau in Enfield. Nnenna Anyanwu is very active and has been very active in the whole area of poverty, and is very concerned about homelessness, I know. So Nnenna, I know you're very busy, and I know you've had other meetings as well. but welcome. I'm really pleased you joined us, and you're also on the Locomotion Core group, which is good because they I know have been working with you. So tell us, I mean, you cover a wide range of CAB, but is it true that you've been overwhelmed by the cost of living crisis and poverty?
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Francis, and good evening, everybody. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so that's true. So basically, I mean, I'm sure most people know Citizens Advice, but we do provide free advice for all the residents of Enfield. We're part of a national network of Citizens Advice offices in each borough around the country, and we provide advice on housing, benefits, debt, consumer issues, just generally quite a wide range of issues, but those are our three sort of core areas. So with the cost of living crisis, that has really impacted residents of Enfield, and the levels of poverty are actually quite high in the borough. We have had a very sharp increase in the number of people with negative budgets, as in they cannot make ends meet. They're not meeting, the income is not matching their expenses. And this has a great impact on the lives of families with children, because obviously, apart from not being able to afford food, there's elements in terms of school costs that they can't afford. People are having to use food banks and rely on charity support. So we do give out quite a few charity grants to residents to buy basic things, even things like nappies, getting a buggy for pregnant women. So we have different funds like that. So we are providing a lot of support around that, which are strong indicators of poverty. Sorry?
Child poverty is something that you're very concerned about because you mentioned that to me, I know. And
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned the nappies and so on, but the whole issue of families being able to bring up their children without the fear of them not having food and so on must be a real concern for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a few statistics I'll just bring in here. So the average wage, or the median wage in the UK, I believe, is about 37,000 a year, and in London that is supposed to be 47,000. And the marker for poverty is if you're earning less than 60% of that figure. And so the London living wage is like 25,000, and in London that 60% of that figure comes out to be 28,000. So already, even with that, people are on the marker of poverty if they're below 28,000. In Enfield, I think even in the Edmonton area, about 25% of people are on that salary, 25,000. So there's a lot of low income households in Enfield. It is a big, big, big challenge for people. And the housing costs are a major part of the expenses. So by the time you take out housing costs in Enfield, which is very high, the private sector, there isn't a lot left for people to live on. That is really creating big problems in the borough. Now, with the Citizens Advice, we've got 5 cost of living poverty indicators. One is the level of council tax arrears, high household costs, so energy costs, rents, those essential bills, high levels of charity support on food banks, people that are on PIP, claiming PIP, and people that have got unmanageable debts or negative budgets. And we've got, a lot of clients that tick all of those boxes. So so I don't know if you know about the fact that the government is actually consulting or speaking about the welfare benefits reforms. One of them is changes to the PIP regulation, qualifications or eligibility criteria, and the other one is about the 2-child limit and the benefit cap. So we have a campaign at the moment for the government to scrap the 2-child benefit, 2-child limit benefits, in order to help these families. Because if you think that there's a limit on the total amount of benefits you can get, but the costs have just risen. So that the benefits that people are receiving are not in line with what they're having to spend out on basic essentials. And this is creating immediate poverty before you even start. And I can tell you that although some people may be thinking that, a lot of that is people on benefits, 51% of Londoners in poverty are actually working. So when you look at the poverty markers, and then in Enfield, there's 31% of children that are living in poverty.
I mean,
So, yeah.
The way you describe it, it makes it clear that, that the work that people are doing, like Olga in Caledonia and the microcredit movement, is really, really important. Olga also mentioned one way of dealing or approaching this is working in partnership. And you do that, don't you? I mean, for example, you're working in partnership with the UVA and with Heat in developing energy advice, aren't you?
Yeah, so our focus as an organization is really looking at how we can help people to increase their income and reduce their costs so that they can live within their means, which is a struggle because we do have a lot of people that are doing all the right things but still not being able to make ends meet, which is it's actually really shocking. Obviously we're living in one of the top richest countries in the world, and people are living like this. But yeah, so part of that is giving energy advice and working in partnership with organizations that do that. So Heat is one of them, and also looking at how we can we do a lot of campaigning around the housing policy, housing costs, private rented sector, to see what can be done in that area. And I think you did mention about, and I've heard in conversations about the work we're doing with Local Motion and the homelessness. So that piece of research was really to find out what the problems, bring to the fore from the community what the problems were and possible solutions. And that all came from the research that we did with community groups. And basically, I'll just tell you that three of those, out of that research, we had three potential solutions. And, obviously the biggest problem, people are saying we need to build more houses, but then it's like, where do we build those houses and how do we build those houses? Because you find out that when people say build more houses, then those houses then go back into the private sector. And do we need more private sector houses when people can't afford to live? And actually, Trust for London have got statistics that they released, I think, at the end of last year, showing that the number of people in poverty in social housing has gone down. Not that they're not in poverty, but the number's gone down. And that's partly because there's no social housing. And but then the people that are in private rented sector, the level of poverty's gone up, and that's because of the rents, and people are just on the low incomes. So yeah, so the solutions that have come out of that were to build more houses, but we want community houses, or the community have said they want community-based houses or community-led. So potentially that is one area that we're exploring, where we look at using a vehicle called a community land trust, so that the community has more power in terms of the types of houses and keeping that in that sort of social rent bracket. The second solution that we came up with was sort of wraparound support for people, because people do want to be empowered to be able to maintain and sustain their tenancies, but if they're having relationship difficulties or substance abuse or antisocial behavior, and they don't necessarily know how or where to get help, so having a stronger network of wraparound support. And then the third solution was what has been discussed quite a lot with the credit union work. So we are looking at creating a fund for people because one of the issues, the barriers to getting into the to getting a property or moving house is about a guarantor or raising money for a deposit. And so having a fund where they can access that money as a sort of low cost loan, whilst at the same time being able to build their financial resilience through saving, that will hopefully help to get them into the rented sector. So it isn't necessarily, I know that I think was it Olga that mentioned it was in part, people have done it in partnership with the local authority. And I do believe that the credit union has spoken to the local authority, but actually the people that we sort of identified through the discussions that could benefit from this are the ones that won't come under the local authority's responsibility. So they may not be necessarily interested in that, but it's people that are working and just need that little bit of help and support, and they don't come under the local authority's duty, so they wouldn't qualify for support anyway. Because if they did, the council's got a deposit scheme that they would give to those people. So we're still exploring ways that can work financially. But yes, the credit union have got certain products and they're interested in that.
Well, let's open it up to people and the questions they have, both to Karen and Nnenna, and obviously Olga, you come in as well. We've had one question written in by Philip Hughes, and I guess this is to you, Karen, mainly. How often do you turn down an application for financial assistance, and what criteria do you apply?
So how our position is really to try to do it, to try to approve it. So we're looking for positives, and often that the people are put off early on. So you'll get lots of people scouting the whole internet for a loan, and when we go back with all our questions about the business and everything, then we don't hear from them again. So we know they aren't serious. So the things that will possibly rule them out is if they. We did do a lot of digging into the business idea and where it's going to be and how it's going to work. And if that's not thought through properly, we might help them a bit more, offer them more help, or reject it. It might be if there are a few sectors that we don't do, which just because typically they don't work very well. So for instance, one of the ones we've recently decided not to do is in the beauty industry, the fillers and all those things, because they're unregulated. So we think that's a high risk. So there's one or two sectors that we wouldn't do, but we'd say so straight away. But our assessment process is all about the person, and not their past, but their potential, and about the business. We do credit checks, and if there's a massive amount of debt, then I think the FCA would not allow us to, or wouldn't be very happy if we did it. And if there's gambling or that we can see on their bank system, then we wouldn't do it then. But otherwise, we try our best to do it.
Anyone else? Patricia, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just a question both to Nnenna and Karen. There is a marginalized group, especially people with mental health issues, that are finding it even more difficult to secure accommodation. At the moment, most of them, the council is offering them accommodation from Enfield to Liverpool without care package attached to it. And secondly, they don't explain to them before they offer them that if they refuse, these are the implications. So my question is, how do we narrow that gap of people who may not be eligible to get the credit union because it's a loan that is payable? So for people with mental health, they are more disadvantaged to be able to raise any loan. So how do we narrow that gap?
Nnenna, do you want to come in with that first? I mean, is this a problem that you've been confronted with, and have you had any solution to that?
Yeah, so this is a problem. It is the fact that the council are moving people far away without necessarily having the right support in place. We the way we're working around it at the moment is, apart from it's a long range thing, I think it's not something that can be resolved quite quickly. But for the individuals that come to us, we are challenging the council on the legal duty that they have of care to make sure that the right things are in place. And in the long term, we are trying to see how those policies can be changed. And also working with, so I think, there's some discussions going on about trying to do more campaigns to make sure that the right support, to raise the awareness basically of the support that should be in place so that people are aware and they do make those challenges. Unfortunately, it is very difficult in terms of housing at the moment, and the council are trying to relieve the responsibilities, and they're having to do it in different ways. So it's just about putting in a challenge and getting the grounds and the evidence for that.
Is that, Karen, a problem you've come across, and is that a problem that microcredit could help with? It seems to me that is probably quite difficult.
I mean, I've certainly come across it, and oddly enough, there've been people in some of our remote villages in Wales who have been put there from parts of London, with no support network, nobody around them, which is crazy. Some of those, when they've joined one of our groups, have found a support network and found some help. But in terms of lending money, it just makes things worse if they've got no way of repaying it. So I don't know that microcredit can help much with that. But I think our self-reliant groups can, because a lot of our women in the groups who come to the groups in the first place have a lot of mental health issues, and the groups definitely help to address that. And it's a support network. So when they're challenging things, they've got a friend that will go with them and help.
We've got one question coming in on the text, and it says, Nnenna, you mentioned that one of the 3 options for managing poverty was to provide more wraparound services. Could you explain what existing services are like, if you can do it briefly, and what people can do to advocate for improved services?
Okay, so I think that, well, this is a piece of work that we're still doing to map all the services that are around. But we do have, for instance, if somebody's going through domestic abuse, there are organisations that can support with that. If there's some substance is an issue, or gambling, as has been mentioned, and we've also got, obviously, with our organisation that helps with advice in terms of what their rights are, and then we also have mental health charities as well. Now, the problem that I think is in Enfield is that the lack of awareness that those services exist and how to access them. So this is a piece of work that we want to do as part of Local Motion, to really bring those organisations together and create a more joined up, or raise more awareness of what's there and what can help at different stages. And then also funding. So there is a lack of investment in those services as well, to be able to really reach the people that need it. So by hopefully bringing them together, highlighting the need, we can raise the profile. So, and this is a call to action. If anyone on here wants to be part of this, just drop your email or drop a message in the chat and I'll pick it up. But I think that's what I see anyway. The wraparound support, I think, is a very key thing that can help to resolve some of these issues.
That question came from Adam Rower, by the way, so thank you for that, because that was a really important question. Anthony, Andrew, you've got your hand up. You demute.
Right,
Yeah, okay.
that's it. Right, look, this is to anyone really, but so my name's Anthony. I'm in the Met Police. I'm a Met Police volunteer. I've been doing it for 11 years, and I sat down in many forums and you've had people over the years, like with over the years that I've been in there and been in these Enfield faith forums because I do faith and community work and many other things, but people who are working, and there's food poverty with people working and homelessness with people working. And then I look at my own. I grew up in Enfield. My parents moved to Palmer's Green, Hedge Lane, when I was 12. And my father bought his first house for about 2.5 grand. And the second house that he bought on Hedge Lane, Palmer's Green, for 15,999, just under 16 grand. And there were 7 of us, and we lived very well. My father had there was 4 girls and 3 boys. This is in the 70s. My parents have passed now, but I don't understand why things have been so exploited in such a way that people could live And now it seems to me that is, I don't know if it's been manufactured to control people, but I'm a volunteer. I don't have a mortgage anymore anyway where I live. But I've got police officers who can't even live in London no more. They've got to go all the way outside London to live. That's ridiculous.
But let's take that up with Nnenna then. I mean, in the past,
And
although
can I just say something else?
yeah, go ahead.
This is a friend of mine here was telling me, he's an ex-fireman, and he said to me that his son and his daughter-in-law are both in really good jobs, for example, yeah, and they've got a property, but they cannot. They're saying that they don't know how. They'd love to have a child, but they can't do it because when his wife goes off, and they have the baby, he won't be able to. They won't be able to afford to live.
That's the point I wanted to make to Nnenna. In the past, poverty we've looked at as people who have been unemployed and so on. But we're beginning to see now, and we have for many years, haven't we, Nnenna, that poverty is also about those people who are working.
Yeah, I think thank you very much for that point slash question. Not sure how to phrase that, but I think that there's so many, it's so multidimensional. It's really difficult to really put one thing on it. But what I will say is that the costs have just gone up. Housing costs, energy costs, astronomically. As you know, world events has triggered some of that. And the wages haven't kept up.
No.
So wages haven't kept up and the costs have gone up. So that's one thing from the sort of financial side of things. There's more pressures on the services, and that's costing more. So that makes it harder to get access to certain services. And I'm thinking in terms of, for instance, your GP. So if you are sick and you can't see the GP and then you don't go to work, then so there's a bit of a cycle in there. So there's so many different dimensions to it. But I think that the housing costs and the private rented sector has, is just
Yeah, in terms of that, see, in terms of the private rental sector, I've got a friend of mine currently right now. He went through a divorce and he split from his wife a few years ago, and then he was homeless, and then now he's living in a HMO in Finchley, and it's unbelievable because he's paying £1,146 and 86 pence a calendar month for one room. A room in Finchley, that's a HMO. There's 10 rooms, and he's in a room. That's his bedroom, his front room, his not a kitchen, because what they've done, they've split the house up, 5 rooms upstairs, 5 rooms downstairs. Got a large kitchen with 2 cookers, 2 fridges, 2 washing machines, 2 dryers, and 1,140. That's ridiculous in one room. I just monopolizing on that, and my parents came here back in the 50s and they was in one room, but then they got out of that system because it was cheap. Rent was cheap then anyway, and now we're talking about it's like going backwards, that people are living in a property, a HMO, multi-dwelling occupancy people on top of one another, and they're paying over £1,000 a calendar month. That's ridiculous.
And that's partly because there's not much choice. So that's,
Yeah, but if you see social housing,
Yes.
housing in the same thing. Just one second. Social housing, though, if they was having the social housing, because my one of my nieces works for one of these housing associations, and there you can get a 2-bedroom or a 1-bedroom for 400 odd pound a calendar month, 500, or 2-bedroom for 6-7, and we're talking about paying 1,200, 13 for one room, depending on the area that you go into. That's ridiculous.
Karen, in terms of microcredit movement, do you do any work with people who are employed, or are they just unemployed? And do you help with the problem of people who just cannot afford to find rooms and they're sort of living on top of each other, as Anthony's explained?
Certainly all the people who borrow from us don't own their properties. They're all renting. And yes, some of the people who are starting businesses are also working and trying to supplement the income with another income. I don't know how they fit it all in, trying to improve things. Yeah, I mentioned before about the ex-offenders. They come out, there's nowhere to live, you know, and it's and then we wonder why they cycle of reoffending. You know, it's
Absolutely. In the Met Police, as I
How-
see it, there's a vicious cycle of why these guys go into county. I'm not saying it's right, but they go and do the county lines, because if you can just go and drop for £300, drop some drugs to Bedford or whatever, they do it because of that, and that's what's caused this vicious cycle. I'm in the Met, as I said, but I'm not advocating that they do that, but it's like they're being cornered into doing, which is not right, but that's what they're doing.
Okay,
And then we've got this.
let Nnenna
Yeah.
come in, and then we could see if anybody else wants to raise a point as well, Anthony.
Yeah, I
Nnenna?
just wanted to say that, you know, in addition to the fact that the private rented sector is the kind of main source of housing at the moment, so they can set the prices because it is, you know, it's economics at the end of the day. They're in the business to make money. So we are campaigning, if you like, that housing shouldn't be seen as an economic asset. It should be seen as a human right. Everyone has a right to a house. And so if we start from that point, rather than seeing it as an economic asset to make money, because that has actually crippled a lot of, you know, I'll say, you know, London, but this is just obviously my opinion, because you just want the maximum rent. And you can't, I don't want to blame the landlords because that's what they've gone into. But now we can see the problem on the other end. But then the council then has the issue of, if they want to build houses, people that have gone to sort of leafy green areas to get the space will say you cannot build here. And so where is the space? They now will say they have challenges finding space. And obviously you've got the, you know, the environmental impacts of building in certain places. So there's so many different dimensions is what I'm trying to say. It isn't just like a one way street for anything. I think there's lots of considerations around how you plan for, you know, the increase in population, the breakdowns in relationships, as you said, that triggered 2 new households, whereas it was 1 before. So where does the other person go? So all of these things have got implications for town planning and housing.
Okay, we've got time for one more question, I think, before we move on. Is there anyone else who would like to raise a question to Olga, Karen, or to Nnenna?
Can I come in,
One more.
Francis?
Yeah, Tony, you come in.
Oh,
You have the last point.
Thank you. I was just going to say, listening about the microcredit was quite interesting for me. And it just made me think about the Bank of Dave. I don't know if anyone remembers the Bank of Dave from up north, which was made into a film, like the guy's story from about 15 years ago. But it was really interesting to see what goes on in the background and how the big businesses manage to stop or try and stop things occurring. And it's a bit like that across everything. And I think, like some of the comments that Anthony said as well, it's a bit like that everywhere, with the landlords being able to increase their rents and no one's doing anything about it. We're sort of falling off the block, if you like, because before we had trade unions fighting everything. Anything that happened, we'd be getting up complaining about it, and we've got a government that don't really care, selling us false stories. Anyway, I'm going to go off into one, so I'll stop there. But I was just going to say, it reminded me of the Bank of Dave. Brilliant story.
You were nodding there, Olga, when he was saying that. I mean, have you had experience with the Bank of Dave or done anything in your research?
No, we haven't, but it was a microfinance institution as far as I can understand. But we were discussing about the making money and how the US and the UK credit scoring system make a lot of people financially excluded, right? And I think that's a perfect example of how, you know, you catalog lenders, your today buy now pay later, but before the doorstep lenders, and you know, these are businesses that make huge amounts of money off people who are financially vulnerable. And yes, they end up being regulated by the FCA, but it always comes a little bit late when the, you know, profit is already a multi-millionaire business, and it's just, yeah. So I absolutely agree. You know, there's an industry behind it, and the financial services industry is big and powerful. So yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks very much for that.
Sorry, can I just say,
yeah,
sorry,
go
Francis,
ahead.
just really quickly, I just wanted to say that, yeah, absolutely. You know, there isn't an upper limit on interest that you can charge if you're a lender. So, and that's crazy that, you know, the most poorest people can be charged, you know, whatever rate that, you know, a shark lender could want to do. So that's a real issue. But just another plug for the locomotion. It's about maybe the community voice needs to be louder. So, and organized. And if we are organized and we're louder, then we can probably try and start to change things, at least for Enfield, and then use that as a template for the rest of London.
Well, thanks very much. I mean, and thank you, all three of you, for taking part in that. And that's been a really good discussion. We're getting close to the end, but we've got one item on the agenda now just to talk about, and that's the work that we're thinking of doing and planning to do with schools. And I just wanted to tell you about that, and we can do a lot more about it in another meeting. But one of the things we're trying to do is develop a partnership to actually work with schools in developing climate action plans. And we've brought a partnership together, which includes NCAF and its air pollution working group with Aurora, who's on it now. It includes UCL, University College London, because they are working with schools to get them to do climate action plans that are school specific. It includes Power Up North London because they want to work with schools to develop community energy and particularly solar power on their roofs. And it involves Edmonton Community Partnership, which have access to schools and work with them. And we had our first meeting of that partnership yesterday to see how we could develop this and work with schools so that we can get a number of schools to develop a climate action plan that involves community energy, which might mean, you know, the development of solar panels, and there are schools interested, that involves work that Aurora and others are doing on air pollution. And what we plan there, if we can, is to get measuring monitors into schools that we can afford to buy, because they're very cheap. They're £120, and I think we've got the money for that now, into some schools to measure pollution inside and outside of the school and see what that is like, and to put that into their climate action plan. And if we can do that in that partnership, that would be really good. Now, the idea is to try and get 2 or 3 schools to begin with to pilot it. And a meeting has now been arranged on June the 18th for all of us to go and make a presentation to head teachers about it. And if we can get enthusiasm, and Edmonton Community Partnership tells us that they have 6 schools that are really interested in it, and UCL is already working with 1 school in Enfield and they want to bring that in with it, I think we would have a really substantial partnership. And Locomotion also wants to be involved in it because they are very interested in the whole concept of co-production and co-design, which this is. And as Paul said at the meeting yesterday, he was there, they're very concerned at how this changes attitudes and hearts and minds of people by being involved in the project. So it looks quite exciting. And I think yesterday was pretty high-powered sort of co-design partnership meeting. And so after June the 18th, when we talk to the heads, we'll look at the 3 schools, and then Power Up North London and UCL and others, and Aurora as well, in terms of air pollution monitoring. We'll begin to talk to the schools of how we develop the logistics around it, because UCL can provide volunteers and help and experts. Power Up North London can help as well by doing pre-feasibility and feasibility studies. They can also look for grants. So we've got a lot of people in with a lot of muscle, if you like, in this partnership. We want to involve the local authority if we can, because I know they're very keen on working with schools and community energy. So we're going to talk to the community change officer in Enfield, who's very good and has been trying to do something around this for some time. And I think this will give her an avenue to do that as well. So that's a project we're just beginning to start. We're right at the beginning of it. We've got the partnership together. We've got the enthusiasm to do it. We've now got to work out the logistics. I don't know if you want to add anything from that. If you're on, Rory, I can see you briefly. Do you want to say anything?
Yeah, just very briefly, I want to say, first of all, about the discussion this evening, that I feel a little bit overwhelmed and also very, very impressed of all the work that's being done in spite of the very, very difficult conditions. And just thinking that, having positive projects can bring a little bit of light, although the work is very, very hard, and you have to keep at it and not lose optimism. So I thank you very much, all three of you. And just, we are trying to show in schools that there's another way, that things can be overcome, and maybe, the previous giving some tools to the next generation.
Thanks. And I mean, I think you're right. It's important to have positive examples. And I mean, the school project isn't about saying to the local authority, you do this, and complaining and writing letters. It's about us doing something, getting together in a sort of co-design, mutual aid way. So I think if it works, it will be, really impressive. It may fail. I hope it won't, but I think we have a very good chance with the partners we've got to make it work. Once we've got that sort of in place and the logistics working out, we'll come back to a forum and tell you a lot more about what's happened and bring in all the partners in that as well. Any questions or any points on that? You're smiling, Paul. You're even laughing now. Okay, nothing else on that. Is there any other issue, any business that people would like to raise before we go? No? Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Olga. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Nnenna, for coming. And I think what you've presented is very, very impressive, and it will give us a lot of food for thought, and we can move forward and think about some of these things.
Sorry,
And
I was going to say, I wanted to quickly say something, just for the record. Because I've been studying a lot of, through my own life's experience, through my son. My son had through illness, medical negligence, got brain damage, and I had a breakdown, and I overcame that about 12 years ago. And from reading books, for good cognitive brain function, you need to have nutrition, analytical, physical things. And when you, because of money, control that people, it causes sickness and disease. That's what it does, because through fear alone, worry, anxiety, grief, sorrow, pain, it releases 1,400 chemicals in your body that contribute to your physical and mental well-being. And that's what happened to me with my son. Why 12 years ago I came off all the meds that I was on through, because I was diagnosed with bipolar, manic depression, acute extreme anxiety disorder. But because of, I want to say, my faith in God, and I started doing some things, training and exercising, came all of those things, joined the Met Police, became an expert by experience, and now sit in meetings like this. And I'm 62, going on 63, and I'll run 100-kilometer ultra marathons. Do you see that? Now, I can't be the only one that can do that, but what I'm saying is I want to empower people. But if our leaders who make, social laws to control the people in a way that don't even affect them, when they're involved in businesses and silent partners and they've got millions in their bank accounts, and then the masses, we're talking about high interest rates, high interest rates, high taxes, and it's not right. So I just wanted to throw that in there anyway.
I mean, I think that's an important point, and I think Local Motion does a lot of work on mental health, and the relationship of mental health to impoverishment is a real problem that they've been looking at, and I think we should do something more on that in the future. So thank you for raising it.
Yeah.
But let's finish now, okay? Because we come to the end of it, and just to say thank you again, thank you, Anthony, for the points you raised. thank you, the three of you. And it's very good to say that you'll keep in touch and you'll help us out if we need advice, because advice is really, really valuable. And thank you for people who've contributed and asked questions. Your experience, Bill, of meeting Mohammed Yunus, I think was quite valuable. So, thank you, everyone. And what we're hoping to do at our next forum, which we said in our core group, is, we're doing something about schools, but someone said, we really, when you look at our forum, if you look at our age range, it is not young in our forum. Young people don't tend to come to forums like this, and they do things in different ways. So what we wanted to try and do, if we can get it together in a month's time, is get people maybe from the Enfield Youth Parliament, a couple of national groups that work with young people in schools, to talk about how they want to approach the issue of climate change and how they learn and how they act, which is different to us. I mean, they would probably fall asleep if they had a 10-minute PowerPoint presentation with lots and lots of words on it, and they disappear. As one student said to me once, I don't read books at all. I watch videos, and they've got to be no more than 2 minutes. So that different pedagogy that young people have is not something that some of us have been brought up in. So we need to communicate and find out how they want to, approach the issue in a different way to us. So if we can get that together next month, and I hope we can. If we can't next month, we will get it together at some point. I think it will be really, really interesting. So that's what we're planning, and I hope that will work. And that idea arose partly from Elaine, who's here today, which is great, on the core group. So thank you, Elaine, and again, thank you, everyone. So let's close this meeting now, and I hope we'll see
When
you
is the next
again.
meeting, by the way? The next meeting?
We don't, it'll be hopefully at the end of June, but it depends on the people who we want to be involved, whether they can make it or not. But the message will go out in our newsletter, okay? So it should be okay. All right, thanks everyone, and we'll end this meeting now.